$700, $800, $1,000 utility bill in Western Washington. Not for a mansion, not for a luxury estate. We're talking about regular working families, retirees, people already getting crushed by gas taxes, grocery inflation, property taxes, vehicle tabs, insurance spikes, and every other temporary fee Olympia keeps stapling onto the backs of taxpayers like a parasite with a law degree. And now, they want you to believe this is just the weather. They want you to believe this is some unavoidable natural disaster. A little market turbulence, just the cost of progress. No, this was engineered. Because when you start digging through the filings, the regulatory approvals, the climate mandates, and the profit reports, a pattern starts to emerge. The same politicians lecturing you about equity and affordability helped create the exact system now hammering working class families with utility bills they can't afford. Meanwhile, Puget Sound Energy posts nearly $500 million in profit, and the CEO pulling down over $6 million a year. Tonight, we're following the money trail from Olympia to the Regulatory Commission straight to your mailbox. This is Left Coast News.
From Seattle to Los Angeles, this is Left Coast News. No apologies, just the truth.
Let's start with the reality on the ground. Across Western Washington, families are opening bills that look less like utility statements and more like ransom notes. And because PSE uses a 59 to 60-day billing cycle, for many customers, these increases stack during the coldest months of the year. So people aren't just seeing a modest bump, they're getting slammed with compound winter charges all at once. The official approved increase that kicked in January 1st of this year, about 12% for electricity, 7% for natural gas. And that's just the baseline rate. The real damage comes from all the mechanisms buried underneath it, the stuff average people never hear about until their bank account gets kneecapped. One of the biggest is something called the Power Cost Adjustment, the PCA. Sounds boring, sounds technical, which is exactly how government agencies and corporate lawyers like it. People have an incredible talent for hiding pain behind acronyms. It's like if the media called protection money a community stabilization contribution. The PCA allows PSE to automatically pass fluctuating wholesale power costs directly onto you. And those power costs exploded. Between 2025 and 2026, PSE's cost for producing, buying, and storing energy jumped by 59%. 59. Not because your family suddenly started using industrial-grade laser cannons in the garage, because the regional energy system is under enormous strain. Now here's where politics enters the picture, whether Olympia likes it or not. Washington state Democrats passed aggressive climate laws that fundamentally reshaped how utilities operate. The Clean Energy Transformation Act, CETA. The Climate Commitment Act, the CCA. These laws legally force utilities into an accelerated transition away from traditional fossil fuel generation toward renewable energy systems. That means retiring cheaper baseline power sources like coal while simultaneously building massive new wind farms, solar projects, battery systems, transmission upgrades, and grid stabilization infrastructure. None of that is cheap. PSE is now chasing billions of dollars in renewable infrastructure spending to comply with these state mandates. Billions. And because these deadlines are written directly into state law, the Utilities and Transportation Commission, the UTC, basically has its hands tied. The state created the mandates, and the regulatory system allows utilities to recover those costs from ratepayers, meaning you. And let's talk about the UTC for a second. This isn't some elected body directly accountable to voters. These commissioners are appointed by the governor. Critics argue the structure creates a system where regulators are naturally aligned with the executive branch's climate agenda rather than aggressively defending ratepayers from cost explosions. You think? Whether people like hearing that or not, that is the reality of how the framework operates. The government didn't accidentally stumble into this situation. They design the policy architecture. But the green mandates are only half the story. The other half, big tech. Washington is experiencing an explosion in AI infrastructure and data center construction. These facilities consume absurd amounts of electricity. Entire industrial scale campuses sucking power around the clock to train AI systems, process cloud storage, and feed the endless digital machine. And here's the kicker. A bill was actually introduced in Olympia this session that would have forced these data centers to shoulder more of the grid upgrade burden themselves. HB 2515. The idea was simple. If giant tech corporations are massively increasing grid demand, then they should pay a larger share of the infrastructure costs instead of dumping them onto residential customers. Makes sense, right? Which is usually a warning sign in politics. The bill failed. This is from a government that claims they want to protect taxpayers, make it more affordable for taxpayers. So now ordinary ratepayers are helping absorb the cost of grid expansion needed to support massive commercial load growth. At the same time, Bonneville Power Administration transmission costs jumped over 24%. Traditional generation capacity keeps disappearing. Demand keeps climbing. And the state keeps forcing faster electrification, electric vehicles, electric heating conversions, more strain, more demand, more pressure on a grid already stretched tight. Then everybody acts shocked when the bills explode, like a guy throwing cinder blocks into a canoe and acting stunned when it starts sinking. Now, if this were truly just a crisis everybody was suffering through equally, you'd expect utility profits to be collapsing too, except they aren't. According to PSC's own financial filings, the company made roughly $346 million in net profit in 2024. In 2025, that jumped to nearly $459 million, a 32% increase. At the exact same time, Washington families were getting financially carpet bombed by utility bills. And what drove that increase? PSC openly stated that higher revenues tied to the approved rate structure contributed heavily to the jump. Translation, your pain became their revenue stream. Then there's CEO compensation. PSC president and CEO Mary Kipp received a total compensation package valued around $6.4 million. Over $5 million of that came through bonuses and incentive structures. Now, technically, regulatory rules claim those bonuses aren't directly line-itemed onto residential utility bills. Fine. But corporate profits still originate from ratepayer money. So when families are deciding whether to keep the thermostat lower while executives collect multi-million-dollar compensation packages, people are naturally going to ask hard questions about priorities. And they should. Because somewhere along the way, the political class and the corporate class developed a fascinating partnership where taxpayers absorb the risk while institutions absorb the reward. Amazing system if you're sitting in a boardroom. Different experience if you're staring at your checking account trying to figure out whether groceries or heat wins this month. And if you think this is just a Washington problem, think again. Because when you start pulling financial reports out of Oregon and California, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. It's the exact same story all across the left coast. Massive investor-owned utility monopolies, governor-appointed regulatory commissions, aggressive climate mandates, skyrocketing customer bills, and executives cashing checks large enough to buy houses most Americans will never afford. The same system, the same talking points, the same result. Let's start in Oregon. Portland General Electric, PGE, reported over $306 million in net income for 2025. Their CEO, Maria Pope, took home approximately $7.6 million in compensation. That includes more than $4.5 million in stock awards and another mountain of bonus compensation. The official CEO to worker pay ratio sits around 45-1. Then there's PacifiCorp, operating as Pacific Power across Oregon, Washington, and California under Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway energy empire. Their 2025 net income, over $4 billion with a B dollars. $4 billion. That jump came after years of wildfire settlements and restructuring, but the core system remains identical. Rate recovery, guaranteed returns, and a regulatory framework designed to protect utility profitability even while customers drown in bills. Now head south into California, where things somehow get even crazier, which is honestly impressive at this point. California treats bad ideas like Pokemon cards. They have to collect every version. Pacific Gas and Electric, PG&E, reported approximately $2.59 billion with a B dollars in profit for 2025. Their CEO, Patty Poppe, received nearly $20 million in compensation. $19.8 million, a 25% raise, while Californians are paying some of the highest electricity rates in the entire United States. And what's the justification? Wildfire mitigation, grid modernization, climate compliance, undergrounding power lines, safety upgrades. Yeah, some of those concerns are legitimate and need to be done. Nobody wants towns burning down because aging infrastructure explodes during fire season, but the structure itself creates a massive incentive problem. How about you take some of her salary and put it towards all that stuff instead of getting it from ratepayers? Because investor-owned utilities operate under guaranteed return systems. That's the loophole most people never hear about. Public advocacy groups in California have been screaming about this for years. The more infrastructure utilities build, the larger the regulated return they can collect. State commissions routinely authorize profit margins around 9 to 10% on approved spending. So the cycle becomes self-reinforcing. The legislature passes aggressive mandates, utilities spend billions complying, regulators approve rate recovery, corporate profits remain protected. Executives collect multi-million-dollar compensation packages, and ratepayers get obliterated. It's a perfect insulated ecosystem where the risk flows downward and rewards flow upward. Meanwhile, ordinary people are sitting at their kitchen tables trying to decide whether they can afford groceries after opening a utility bill. And the pain is spreading everywhere. In Oregon, utility rates are now reportedly more than 50% higher than they were in 2020. So much public anger exploded over winter billing spikes that lawmakers actually passed legislation preventing utilities from implementing new hikes during winter months because households literally couldn't absorb the financial hit anymore. Think about that. The state effectively acknowledged bills have become so brutal they needed seasonal restrictions to stop consumers from getting crushed during freezing weather. Then you get to California. Electricity prices there have risen over 90% since 2013. And now California has introduced income-based fixed utility charges where customers pay mandatory flat fees just to remain connected to the grid regardless of actual usage. That means even if families cut consumption, turn off lights, install solar, and try to conserve, they still get hit with baseline charges simply for existing inside the system. People are trying to save money while the system keeps redesigning itself to guarantee revenue extraction anyway. And that's the broader West Coast pattern. From Seattle to Portland to Sacramento, the same political ideology built the same regulatory framework with the same outcome. Higher costs, higher rates, higher corporate profits, and working families footing the bill while being told it's all necessary for the transition. This is your Democrats creating these laws, protecting these corporate interests. Democrats that claim to care about the taxpayer want to save you money. It's all lies. At some point, taxpayers are going to have to ask a very reasonable question. If these policies are so successful, why does life keep getting more expensive for the people actually paying for them? Funny how that question never seems to come up at the executive bonus meetings. People really did invent a fascinating civilization, didn't we? Here's the part that should concern every household in Washington. The current pain may only be the beginning. PSC has already filed proposals for additional hikes stretching into 2027, 2028, and 2029. The biggest proposed increase? Nearly 17% for residential electric customers in 2027 alone. Natural gas, another 13% jump proposed right out of the gate. Now, to be fair, those future hikes are not approved yet. The UTC has suspended them pending review under dockets 26005 and 26006. There's an active public comment process underway right now. But the broader trajectory is clear. Higher infrastructure costs, higher compliance costs, higher transmission costs, higher demand, higher rates, and the average taxpayer keeps getting squeezed from every direction while state leaders continue selling expensive policy experiments as moral necessities. Meanwhile, Washington residents are already dealing with some of the highest gas taxes in America, rising property taxes, insurance hikes, and a cost of living that's becoming outright hostile to middle-class families. There's a point where ordinary people stop hearing the phrase energy transition and start hearing you're paying more forever. And honestly, you can understand. Nobody's arguing that the electric grid should stay frozen in 1975. Nobody's arguing against reliability. But there's a growing anger across Washington because families feel like they're being forced to bankroll an accelerated political and corporate transformation they never truly consented to and increasingly can't afford. And when elected officials champion the mandates, when appointed regulators approve the frameworks, when corporations post record profits, and when taxpayers get handed the bill, people are going to connect the dots. That isn't extremism. That's accountability. Keep watching your statements. Keep watching Olympia. And keep asking who benefits every time another necessary change is made. If this report helped break down what's really happening, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Follow Left Coast News on YouTube, Rumble, Brighteon, BitChute, Patreon, Facebook, X, Truth Social, Instagram, TikTok, and Spotify. Drop a comment below and let me know what your utility bill looks like, because this is exactly the kind of pressure taxpayers need to document and push back on when necessary adjustment shows up in your mailbox. Because this fight isn't just about electricity anymore. It's about whether working families in Washington can still afford to live in the state they grew up in. This is Left Coast News.